I never imagined I'd be humiliated by my own parents on my sister's wedding day. While guests sat warm and dry under a beautiful canopy, they made me sit outside, alone, in the rain. They said it was about space. About aesthetics. About not ruining the moment. What they didn't know was that the man they called my poor husband was watching everything. And when the groom crossed one line too many, my husband stood up, spoke 6 calm words, and turned that perfect wedding into a nightmare. No one there will ever forget that I learned very early what it felt like to stand in a room full of people and still feel invisible. In our house, love wasn't shared equally, it was ranked. My sister was always first. First to be praised. First to be forgiven. First to be protected. I was the other one. The extra. The child who learned to stay quiet so she wouldn't make things worse. When my sister brought home good grades, my parents framed them on the wall. When I did well, they said, "That's what you're supposed to do." If she cried, the whole house stopped. If I cried, I was told to toughen up, stop being dramatic, and think about how stressed they were. Somehow, my feelings were always inconvenient. At family gatherings, relatives would ruffle my sister's hair and talk about her bright future. Then they'd turn to me and ask what went wrong. Not directly, of course. They'd ask why I was so quiet. Why I didn't smile more. Why I wasn't more like her. I learned to nod, smile politely, and swallow whatever answer I really wanted to give. Birthdays made it clearer. Her parties were events. Decorations, gifts, attention. Mine were obligations. A cake, maybe. A rushed photo. And the unspoken reminder that we shouldn't make a big deal out of everything. I stopped asking for things. It hurt less to expect nothing. By the time I was a teenager, I understood my role. I was the one who adjusted. The one who apologized first. The one who was expected to endure discomfort so others could stay comfortable. My parents called it maturity. They said I was strong. What they really meant was that I was convenient. I didn't know then how dangerous that lesson would become. I only knew that in my family, love came with conditions, and I was never the one they chose when it mattered most. My sister didn't just grow up loved, she grew up celebrated. Everything she did was proof of how special she was. If she succeeded, it was because she was talented. If she failed, it was because the world hadn't been fair to her. There was always an explanation. Always an excuse. Always a safety net waiting underneath. I didn't get that version of childhood. When I stumbled, it became a character flaw. When I struggled, it was proof that I wasn't trying hard enough. My parents never said I was a disappointment out loud, but they didn't have to. It lived in the sighs, the comparisons, the way their tone changed when they said my name after hers. At school, teachers praised my sister's confidence. At home, my parents praised her presence. Meanwhile, I was told to be realistic. Practical. Quiet. Dreams were for people like her. I was encouraged to aim lower so I wouldn't embarrass myself. Somehow, ambition in me looked like arrogance to them. Family dinners felt like performance reviews. My sister spoke, and everyone listened. I spoke, and conversations drifted away. If she interrupted me, it was enthusiasm. If I interrupted her, it was rude. The rules were invisible but unbreakable. Over time, I stopped competing. Not because I couldn't, but because I wasn't allowed to win. I became the dependable one. The helpful one. The one who smoothed things over when my sister caused chaos and my parents didn't want to deal with it. I carried responsibilities she was never asked to touch. They told me I should be grateful. That being low maintenance was a compliment. That one day, I'd understand how lucky I was. But deep down, I understood something else entirely. In my family's story, my sister was the success they proudly claimed. I was the failure they quietly explained away. And no matter how hard I tried, I was never meant to shine, only to stand in the background and make her glow brighter. I met my husband during a season of my life when I wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. I was tired of proving myself, tired of shrinking so other people could feel tall. He came into my world quietly, no flashy car, no loud promises, no need to dominate every room. Just calm confidence and an ease that felt unfamiliar, like safety I hadn't earned yet. From the beginning, my parents didn't like him. Not because he was unkind or irresponsible, but because he didn't fit their definition of success. He dressed simply. He spoke carefully. He listened more than he talked. To them, that translated into weak. Ordinary. Temporary. My mother asked what he did for a living with a tone that already disapproved of the answer. When I told them I loved him, they smiled the way people do when they think a phase will pass. My father pulled me aside and warned me not to ruin my future over emotions. My sister laughed and said, "He seems nice, for now." It was clear they expected me to come to my senses and choose someone better. Someone louder. Someone impressive enough to show off. What they never noticed was how he treated me. He never compared me to anyone. Never rushed me. Never made me feel like I had to earn space in his life. Where my family minimized me, he made room. Where they criticized, he listened. And when I doubted myself, he didn't correct me, he waited until I believed again. They called him poor because he didn't flaunt money. They called him unambitious because he didn't brag. They assumed he needed me more than I needed him. The truth was the opposite. He chose a quiet life on purpose, and he chose me with the same certainty. I didn't fall for the wrong man. I fell for the first person who saw me clearly, and that scared my family more than they were willing to admit. Once my family decided my husband wasn't good enough, they stopped pretending to be polite. It didn't happen all at once. It came in smiles that lingered too long, jokes that landed just slightly off, and questions designed to remind him, and me, where they thought he belonged. Every gathering turned into a quiet test he was never meant to pass. My mother would ask him about his plans, with a raised eyebrow, as if adulthood only counted when it followed her script. My father spoke over him, corrected him, dismissed his opinions before he could finish a sentence. And my sister. She perfected the art of casual cruelty. Compliments wrapped in insults. Laughter that invited others to join in without realizing they were laughing at him. The worst part wasn't the words. It was the way they looked at him, like he was a temporary guest who had overstayed his welcome. At dinners, he was given the worst seat. At conversations, the least attention. They praised my sister's fiancé endlessly, calling him driven and promising, while my husband was referred to by his first name only, never his title, never his achievements. I tried to defend him. I really did. But every time I spoke up, I was accused of being sensitive, dramatic, ungrateful. My parents warned me not to create tension. My sister rolled her eyes and said I was embarrassing myself. Slowly, I learned that standing up for him meant standing alone. Through it all, my husband stayed calm. He didn't argue. He didn't explain himself. He simply observed, quietly filing away every insult, every slight, every assumption. I thought he was enduring it for my sake. What I didn't realize was that he wasn't tolerating them out of weakness. He was waiting. And when people underestimate you long enough, they never see the moment coming when the balance finally shifts. My sister announced her engagement like it was a royal decree. A family group chat message followed by phone calls, followed by an in-person dinner where everyone was expected to react with the correct level of excitement. My parents beamed like they'd personally won something. This was the moment they'd been waiting for, their golden child finally securing the perfect future. From the very beginning, the wedding wasn't about love. It was about image. Venues were discussed before vows. Guest lists mattered more than relationships. My mother talked about centerpieces and seating charts with military precision, while my father bragged about the groom's career to anyone who would listen. Every detail had to signal success. The groom fit perfectly into their fantasy. Confident. Loud. Ambitious in a way that demanded attention. He spoke about his job like it was a trophy, casually dropping numbers and titles into conversations. My parents soaked it up. My sister soaked it up even more. Standing next to him, she looked like she'd finally proven something. My husband and I were barely acknowledged during these conversations. When we were, it was usually to remind us how simple our own wedding had been. Small. Modest. Almost apologetic. My sister joked that ours felt more like a gathering than a celebration. Everyone laughed. I smiled, because that's what I'd been trained to do. As the plans grew more extravagant, so did the expectations. My parents made it clear this wedding would be remembered. It would be talked about. It would set a standard. And without saying it directly, they also made something else clear. This was my sister's moment. And my role, as always, was to stay out of the spotlight, support quietly, and not disrupt the picture they were so desperate to perfect. I didn't know then that this announcement was the first crack in a carefully built illusion, one that would shatter in front of everyone they were trying to impress. The wedding invitation arrived thicker than it needed to be, heavy with inserts and instructions. It wasn't just an invitation, it was a rulebook. Dress code. Arrival times. Seating expectations. Even a note about maintaining the aesthetic. My name was printed neatly, but it felt more like a summons than a welcome. My mother called the same day to make sure I'd read everything carefully. She reminded me not to wear anything too flashy, not to draw attention, not to make my sister uncomfortable on her day. She said it sweetly, like advice. But I heard what she really meant. Blend in. Stay small. Don't embarrass us. Then came the seating arrangement. She explained it slowly, as if I might argue. Family at the front. Important guests under the canopy. Everyone else placed where it made sense. When I asked where my husband and I would be sitting, there was a pause. Too long. She cleared her throat and said it would be more appropriate for us to be seated toward the side. Separate section. Out of the way. I tried to laugh it off, but my stomach tightened. My sister later messaged me herself. She said she didn't want any awkward energy near the main area. She added a smiley face, as if that softened the blow. When I asked what she meant, she replied, "You know, vibes matter." My husband read the messages quietly. He didn't react the way I expected. No anger. No hurt. Just a nod, like he'd just confirmed something he already knew. He told me we didn't have to go. That we could make an excuse. That my comfort mattered more than appearances. But a lifetime of conditioning is hard to undo. I told him it was fine. That I could handle it. That it was just one day. I didn't realize that agreeing to those conditions meant accepting one more humiliation. And this time, it would happen in front of everyone. That I woke up to the sound of rain tapping against the window, soft at first, then heavier, like a warning I didn't want to hear. The sky was dark and unsettled, the kind of gray that presses down on your chest. I lay there longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was just nerves. Big days always come with nerves. That's what I told myself. My phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from my mother reminding me to arrive early. From my sister stressing about timelines. From relatives sending cheerful notes about how beautiful the day was going to be. No one mentioned the weather. No one asked how I was feeling. I got dressed slowly, choosing something simple, exactly as instructed. Nothing bold. Nothing memorable. My husband watched me from the doorway as I fixed my hair. He asked if I was okay. I said yes too quickly. He didn't push, but his eyes stayed on me, searching. He glanced out the window, then back at me, like he was measuring something I couldn't see. I remember thinking how calm he looked, almost detached. The drive to the venue was quiet. Rain streaked across the windshield, blurring the world outside. As we got closer, traffic slowed. Guests in expensive cars pulled in, umbrellas opening like shields. The venue looked beautiful from a distance, white tents, flowers, soft lights glowing despite the storm. Everything looked perfect, and somehow that made my chest tighten more. When we parked, my husband reached for my hand and squeezed it gently. "Whatever happens," he said, "stay close to me." His voice was steady, but there was weight behind it. I nodded, though I didn't understand why he sounded like that. As we stepped out into the rain, my shoes already sinking slightly into wet ground, I felt it clearly then. Not fear. Not sadness. A sense that I was about to be tested again, and that this time, something would finally break. The moment we reached the entrance, my mother intercepted us. She didn't hug me. Didn't ask if I was cold. Her eyes went straight to my shoes, then flicked toward the seating area under the canopy. She leaned in close, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret, and said, "You'll need to sit outside. It's already full inside." I thought I'd misheard her. Outside? I looked past her and saw empty chairs, dry ones, reserved ones with neat little name cards. Before I could say anything, my sister appeared, dressed pristine, makeup flawless, irritation already written across her face. "We talked about this," she said sharply. "This is my day. Please don't make it difficult." Rain soaked through the thin fabric of my sleeves as they guided me away from the main area, past rows of guests who suddenly found the floor very interesting. A few glanced up, curiosity flashing across their faces, then quickly looked away. No one said a word. That silence was louder than anything. They placed a chair near the edge of the lawn. No cover. No umbrella. Just wet grass and open sky. My mother adjusted the seating chart like this was a minor correction, then told me to be understanding. "It's just for the ceremony," she said. "Try not to draw attention." I stood there, rain running down my hair, my dress clinging uncomfortably to my skin, while guests whispered behind manicured hands. I heard my sister laugh somewhere under the canopy. I heard music begin to play. I realized, with a sick twist in my stomach, that they weren't embarrassed. They were comfortable. Comfortable humiliating me because they knew I wouldn't cause a scene. Because I never had. Because I'd been trained my whole life to swallow moments like this quietly. I looked around for my husband. He was gone. For a brief second, panic flared. Then something else replaced it, anger, sharp and unfamiliar. The rain felt colder now, heavier, like it was pressing me into the ground. I could feel eyes on me, measuring, judging, filing this moment away as gossip. And as I stood there, soaked and shaking, I didn't know what hurt more, the rain on my skin or the certainty that my own family believed I deserved it. As the ceremony began, I kept scanning the crowd, searching for my husband's face. Every seat under the canopy was filled with familiar strangers, people dressed in warmth and comfort, people who belonged. But he wasn't there. Not beside me. Not anywhere I could see. The chair next to mine sat empty, rain pooling on the fabric like it was mocking me. At first, I worried something had happened. Maybe he'd gone to get help. Maybe he was arguing with someone. The minutes stretched, each one heavier than the last. My hands were numb, my hair plastered to my cheeks, but what unsettled me most was the quiet. He would never leave without telling me. Never. Guests glanced over occasionally, curiosity sharpening into something uglier. I caught snippets of whispers carried by the rain. "Is she alone? Did he not show up? That's awkward." Each word landed like a pebble thrown gently but repeatedly, meant to bruise without drawing blood. My mother didn't look at me once. My sister walked down the aisle glowing, the picture of perfection, while I sat outside the frame, literally and figuratively. Applause erupted. Music swelled. I clapped too, mechanically, because stopping would have drawn attention, and attention was apparently the worst crime I could commit. I checked my phone discreetly. No messages. No missed calls. For the first time that day, doubt crept in. Not about him, but about myself. Had I been wrong to think things would be different? Had I asked too much by expecting basic respect? Then I noticed something else. A few people near the front looked confused, glancing toward the entrance, then back at the groom. The groom himself kept adjusting his tie, his smile stiffening, his eyes darting toward the aisle like he was waiting for something, or someone. That's when it hit me. My husband wasn't missing. He was choosing his moment. And whatever he was about to do, it wasn't for show. It was for balance. The groom noticed me around the same time the rain began to fall harder. I saw it in the way his eyes narrowed, the way his jaw tightened as he glanced past the canopy toward my lonely chair. During a pause in the ceremony, he leaned toward my sister and whispered something that made her laugh. Not a nervous laugh. A cruel one. Later, during a break between rituals, he stepped away from the altar and walked toward me, shoes sinking slightly into the wet grass. Guests watched openly now, pretending not to. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could smell his cologne, sharp and expensive. Rough spot you've got, he said, smirking. Guess not everyone makes the VIP list. I said nothing. I had learned long ago that silence made people uncomfortable. He mistook it for weakness. He glanced toward the entrance again, then back at me. Where's your husband anyway? He asked loudly enough for others to hear. Couldn't afford a suit. Or did he finally realize this isn't his crowd? A couple of people chuckled. My sister watched from a distance, arms crossed, satisfaction written all over her face. The groom leaned in closer, lowering his voice just enough to feel threatening. You should have listened to your parents, he said. Marrying down always catches up with you. Something snapped inside me, not outwardly, but deep and final. I felt calm in a way I never had before. I met his eyes and held them. For a split second, uncertainty flickered across his face. He straightened quickly, masking it with arrogance. Enjoy the rain, he added, turning back toward the canopy like he'd just won something. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that arrogance makes people sloppy. It makes them talk too much. It makes them forget who's watching and who's listening. While he was busy performing confidence, he failed to notice the shift happening around him. Because somewhere behind him, out of sight but very much in control, my husband had finally arrived. And the groom had just given him every reason to stop being polite. The first sign was the change in the air. Conversations faltered. A few heads turned toward the entrance at the same time, like a ripple moving through the crowd. I followed their gaze and saw my husband walking across the lawn, rain beating on his jacket, posture straight, expression unreadable. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't angry. He looked certain. He stopped beside me and handed me his umbrella without a word. The simple gesture felt louder than any speech. As the rain finally stopped hitting my face, I felt something else settle in its place, relief. He squeezed my shoulder gently, then turned toward the canopy. His eyes met mine for a brief moment, and in that look was a quiet promise, I've got this. Guests watched openly now. Whispers spread. The groom frowned, clearly annoyed by the interruption. We're kind of in the middle of something, he said sharply, stepping forward like he owned the space. My husband didn't look at him right away. He surveyed the setup calmly, taking in the seating, the soggy chair, the lack of cover. When he finally spoke, his voice was level. She's sitting out here, he said, more statement than question. The groom scoffed. Seatings arranged, he replied. Everyone's where they belong. My husband nodded slowly, as if considering that. I see, he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Not to record. Not to call for backup. Just to check something. The groom laughed nervously, glancing at my sister. Is this some kind of joke? He asked. You can't just walk in and... My husband raised a hand, and the groom stopped talking mid-sentence. The sudden silence was startling. I can, my husband said calmly. And I will. That was the moment people felt it. Not the words, but the authority behind them. My parents looked uneasy. My sister's smile faltered. The groom shifted his weight, suddenly aware that he might not be the most important man in the room. My husband stepped forward, rain-soaked grass beneath his shoes, and addressed the groom directly. Before this goes any further, he said, we need to clarify something. And with that, the wedding stopped being about vows, and started being about consequences. My husband didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The quiet way he spoke carried farther than shouting ever could. You've been very comfortable today, he said to the groom, making assumptions about people. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. My sister stared at him, confusion starting to replace her confidence. The groom laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. Look, man, I don't know who you think you are, he said, but this is a private event. My husband nodded once. It is, he replied. And that's exactly why this matters. He turned slightly, addressing not just the groom, but everyone listening. I don't usually mix work with personal events, he continued. But when personal behavior reflects professional conduct, lines blur. Murmurs spread. My father frowned, trying to piece things together. My mother's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to interrupt but didn't know how. My husband looked back at the groom. You introduced yourself to me last year, he said calmly. You probably don't remember. You were busy talking about your promotion. The groom's face paled almost imperceptibly. My husband pulled out his phone and opened an email, holding it up just enough for the groom to see. I couldn't read it, but I didn't need to. The groom's expression changed instantly. His smile vanished, replaced by something close to fear. This isn't the place for this, he muttered. Actually, my husband replied, this is the exact place. He lowered the phone and continued, you work for a subsidiary company that operates under my firm's contracts. I'm the one who signs off on executive behavior clauses. The words landed like stones dropping into still water. Silence followed. Heavy. Absolute. My sister's breath caught. What does that mean? She asked, her voice small for the first time in her life. My husband didn't look at her. It means, he said gently, that how he treats people, especially in public, matters. My parents stared at him now, really looking for the first time. Not the clothes. Not the quiet demeanor. The presence. The control. The authority they dismissed so easily. Realization spread across their faces, slow and devastating. The groom swallowed hard. We can talk about this later, he said quickly. Man to man. My husband shook his head. Later already happened, he replied. And in that moment, everything my family thought they knew, about status, about power, about who mattered, collapsed under the weight of the truth they'd been too proud to see. My husband took one step closer to the groom, not invading his space, just enough to make the moment unavoidable. His voice stayed calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. Your employment contract includes a professional conduct clause, he said. Public behavior that damages company reputation is grounds for immediate termination. The groom's laugh came out sharp and hollow. You can't be serious, he said, glancing around like someone would rescue him. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the officiant stood frozen, hands clasped, unsure whether to intervene or disappear. Rain dripped from the canopy in slow, steady beats. I am serious, my husband replied. He opened his phone again, scrolling briefly. I've already documented today's conduct. Multiple witnesses. Public setting. Clear violation. He looked up. Effective immediately, your role is terminated. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. My sister let out a strangled sound, half gasp, half protest. You can't do this, she said, stepping forward. This is our wedding. My husband finally turned to her. His expression softened, just slightly. I'm sorry, he said honestly. But your wedding doesn't exempt him from consequences. My mother covered her mouth. My father looked like the ground had shifted beneath him. Guests stared openly now, phones forgotten, eyes wide. This wasn't drama. This was reality cutting through a carefully staged performance. The groom's face flushed deep red. This is harassment, he snapped. I'll sue. My husband nodded once. You're welcome to try, he said calmly. Legal will be in touch. Security too, if needed. That was when it broke. The groom's shoulders slumped. The arrogance drained out of him like water from a cracked glass. He looked around, searching for support, but found only discomfort and distance. The same crowd he tried to impress now avoided his gaze. I realized then that this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about humiliation for its own sake. It was about correction. About balance. About showing what happens when power is misused and people are treated as disposable. My husband stepped back and returned to my side, placing himself between me and the crowd. He offered me his arm. We're leaving, he said quietly. And as we turned away, the wedding behind us frozen in shock, I understood something clearly for the first time in my life. Respect isn't demanded. It's enforced, by those who know their worth and refuse to let others forget it. The moment we walked away, the noise behind us didn't follow. No shouting. No apologies. Just a heavy, stunned silence that felt louder than the rain ever had. Guests stood frozen under the canopy, unsure whether to resume the ceremony or pretend none of it had happened. The music never restarted. My parents were the first to move. My mother hurried after us, heels slipping slightly on the wet ground. She called my name, her voice trembling, suddenly soft in a way it had never been when I needed it most. Wait, she said. We didn't know. We didn't understand. The words felt hollow, arriving far too late. My father followed, avoiding my husband's eyes. For the first time, he looked small. Confused. You could have told us, he muttered, like the responsibility still belonged to me. I realized then that even now, they were trying to protect themselves from guilt rather than face what they'd done. Behind them, my sister stood motionless, her perfect day unraveling in real time. Mascara streaked down her cheeks as she argued with the groom, who was now yelling into his phone, panic replacing arrogance. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and something like fear crossed her face. Not because she'd lost him, but because she'd lost control. I didn't think it would go this far, she whispered when she reached me. I almost laughed. It had always gone this far for me. She just hadn't been the one standing in the rain before. My husband didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His silence drew a line no one could cross. The power had shifted, and everyone felt it. Apologies began to spill out, messy and desperate, overlapping each other. But something inside me had settled. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was done. I looked at my family, at the people who had taught me to shrink, and realized they were finally seeing the cost of that lesson. Shame had replaced certainty. Regret had replaced pride. And for once, I didn't stay to make it easier for them. We didn't rush. We didn't look back. My husband walked beside me at an unhurried pace, his arms steady, his presence grounding. The rain began to slow as we reached the edge of the venue, droplets thinning until they felt more like mist than punishment. I took a deep breath and realized, with quiet surprise, that my chest didn't feel heavy anymore. Behind us, my family was still scrambling, trying to salvage explanations, trying to repair reputations, trying to pretend control hadn't slipped through their fingers. For the first time in my life, their chaos wasn't mine to manage. I wasn't responsible for smoothing anything over. I wasn't required to stay and absorb discomfort so others could feel at ease. As we reached the car, my husband opened the door for me, the same simple gesture he'd done 1,000 times before. I paused, looking back once, not at the wedding, but at the girl I used to be. The one who learned to accept less. The one who thought endurance was the same as strength. I felt a strange tenderness for her. She'd done her best with what she was given. We drove away in silence, not the awkward kind, but the peaceful kind that settles after a storm. The road ahead glistened, washed clean. I watched the venue disappear in the distance, shrinking until it was just another place I no longer belonged. And for the first time, that didn't hurt. My phone buzzed. Messages. Missed calls. Apologies dressed as concern. I turned the screen face down. Some conversations don't deserve immediate answers. Some endings don't need explanations. Closure doesn't always come from words, it comes from walking away without begging to be understood. My husband glanced at me and smiled softly. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. And this time, it was the truth. I felt taller. Lighter. Like I'd finally stepped out of a shadow I didn't realize I was still standing in. That day didn't just change how my family saw me. It changed how I saw myself. I learned that dignity isn't given by parents, approval, or tradition. It's claimed. Quietly. Firmly. Without apology. And as the last of the clouds broke apart overhead, I understood something I'd waited a lifetime to feel. I wasn't walking away from my family. I was walking toward myself.